Live. Good afternoon. How are we all today? Welcome back to episode 7. So we've been getting some good feedback, guys. It looks like you're still interested in hearing us. We're getting some good ratings coming through. So we thought, let's carry on. Let's see what new topics we've got for you. So Neil, how you doing? Good to see you. You well?
I'm doing great, actually. Thanks. Yeah, really good. Feeling pretty good today. Had a busy couple of days, actually, doing a lot of coaching online. So I've been sitting in front of the screen a lot. And if my screen gets a bit slow, I noticed it was a bit slow earlier. That's because my wife's downstairs doing yoga and she seems to be using a ton of broadband up doing that. But how about you? Everything all right with you?
Oh, yeah, not bad, actually. I'm just about to have a few days out, actually. Nice to have a break. So I've got a few days planned. I'm going to be out of country. I haven't been out of country for 4 months. I mean, gosh, in our world, right, we're traveling all the time. So I'm going to be out of country for a few days. So, yeah, looking forward to that. So here we are, episode 7. And Neil, we've got a guest with us again, right? So we had a good guest a little while ago, but we've got a new guest with us today.
Yeah, so I'm delighted to welcome Ian Chappell onto the call. He's a good friend and colleague of mine. And the reason I wanted to invite Ian on is Ian's a retired superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, so a completely different type of leadership conversation than the ones we might normally have. So Ian, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Good to see you both again. Yeah, all good so far.
And how are you feeling about being on a call about a discussion about leadership?
I used to do some media work in the Met a long time ago, and it's taking me right back
Is it?
to that, which is a nervous experience.
So you don't have to worry about trying to justify anything or explain anything to us, okay? So be careful about what you're saying.
There probably won't be any comeback on anything you say. We don't know who's listening, Neil, right?
No, that's true. Yeah, there'll be people going in and going, I recognise him. That's Chappell. Anyway, great to have you on. And you know, the topic of leadership is such a broad topic, and it affects so many different areas of life. And we talk about business a lot, but obviously in the police, it must be very different. I mean, just explain a little bit about your career, because it's worth explaining what you did and the different types of leadership role you have, just to give a bit of perspective to everyone.
So, in brief summary, 35 years as a police officer. You joined as a constable. I finished up as a superintendent. 2/3 of that was what we call borough-based sort of operational policing, sort of the normal 24-hour uniform stuff. And then towards the last third of my career, I moved into some specialisms. I was also a public order major incident commander. So you get involved in that throughout your career, and you have additional training to deal with that. So that's my career in a brief nutshell. But it's with leadership. Leadership starts the day you first, if you like, hit the streets as a PC.
Okay.
Because as soon as you arrive at an incident, you're in charge.
Wow.
So if you think about that, you know, so whatever it is, you've got members of the public there. You're the person who's got to arrive, take charge, and make sense of what's happening. Mm. So it's not leadership. It's not all about the managers, the bosses at the top. It runs right throughout the organisation, and that's the same in any business, really.
Really interesting.
Let me just think about that for a little while then, Ian, because that means then that has to be absolutely built into your recruitment and appointment process, right? The people you're recruiting have to have that capability or that potential from day one.
Yeah. And if you think about leadership, I was thinking about, so I watched the first 4 of your presentations so far. You can think of leadership when you were in primary school. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, who was the kid who was always really good at organising football or the best games in the playground?
Yeah.
You know, and if you think about that, you know, people have been evidencing leadership throughout their life, really. So you just, as an employer, you're trying to harness that then, aren't you? And develop and build on that.
Yeah. So can leadership be taught then? Because you're pulling people off not everybody that signs up for the police will have been the person who's pulling the football team together in the schoolyard. So can you train it into people?
I think you can give people the principle, because it was a recurring theme throughout my career, that always trying new ideas about emphasising how important leadership is, and little skills and little ways of doing it, and what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and so on. So it's always been a recurring theme, and I don't think anybody ever gets to the perfect level, because the Metropolitan Police was reinvesting in it, and I'm sure businesses do as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you're looking for people who've got chat and confidence. That's what you're really looking for, and you can build on that. And when I first joined, our training was very process based and not much about that wider sort of skill area. But that's changed over the years.
But can we just distinguish on that then between having leadership style, which they need to do in their job,
yeah,
and leadership of troops within the force, right? So
yeah,
leading officers and them having to respect your opinion and your direction. Should we talk a bit about that? How does that work in terms of leadership training in the force to help somebody climb through the ranks?
So a lot of our promotion was based on experience. You had to give evidence of you could deal with certain things. Some of that involved leadership. And some people do it well, some people do it okay, and some people do it badly. And I always sort of, in a very simplistic way, I think people are in three boxes. People are exceptional at work, people do a good job for you, and some people do a poor job. And at work, you're always trying to get the poor, reduce the poor group to increase the good group and to increase the excellent group. And some people do it really well, and some people, even though they're very senior, are not good at leadership, even though they're at a very senior level in our organisation, 50,000 staff or whatever, police officers and police staff. But we still have people at a very high level, very clever people, but who are poor leaders.
And when you think about leadership, what examples do you see of good leadership? So when you've seen good leadership, before we focus on poor leadership, what are the good leaders doing something like the police?
Well, if I just a personal example, I got promoted to chief inspector. I went to my new station, sat down with the chief superintendent, and he said, "Today's the first day in preparing you to be a superintendent, which is the next rank." And he said, "You've got a good operational profile. You haven't got a degree.
Okay.
So if you go and find yourself a master's degree, part-time course, and I'll give you day release." And that was incredible. And that made me a better person at work from what I learnt on that degree course.
Okay. All right. So we just had a little bit of a technical issue there where Albert's laptop dropped out. But he's back on. He's in a different part of the screen. Anyway, apologies, Ian, for that. So you were just explaining about a boss you had who really focused on investing in you and what you needed. Question that popped into my head as you were talking about that was, so how did you feel about that? And how did that affect the way you led as a result of that situation?
I thought it was fantastic that someone was prepared to invest in me like that, and I was quite surprised. It's quite daunting then, because you've got to go out and do it. And I didn't have a first degree, so this was an opportunity to get a master's degree. Then how does that affect you? Well, it makes you think about how you treat people who report to you. How can you help them? And then in the longer term, how did it help? All the material I learned and studied doing that course, of course, my learning came back into the workplace. And that made me a better, more efficient boss within the system because of what I learned. And it was also that exposure to the external rather than internal police learning. I was now exposed in a university, in a class with more mature students, none of whom are from a police background. So you've got that interest there where you're drawing on other people's experiences as well.
And I guess the thought that pops into my head is, so if a leader setting an example by the way he leads you affects your leadership in the future, that's a really so it's a really important part of leadership, is be aware that the way you lead will affect and shape the way your people lead when they get into leadership roles.
Yeah, and that was also a long-term investment, wasn't it? It took 3 years to do the degree, etc. on sort of day releases. So that's quite a long-term investment for someone to be willing to commit to. So that was a personal example. Then if I look at a wider example, I just had to go to monthly performance meetings, and I'm sure in your business you do that sort of thing, where you've got a very senior bod in there, and they're going through performance against targets, and they're calling people out. People are doing exceptionally well, and people who aren't doing so well. Being in the not so well box is a horrible place to be. Now, a lot depends on how that person runs that meeting. I've experienced the one where it's like ritual humiliation and bullying in front of your peers, and that creates individuals who then close down. Why do I want to speak or contribute in that meeting if that's going to happen? And nobody wants to be in that box. But then we had a new boss arrive, and he would say, right, here's the performance target, this is how we're doing. And he'd said, what is stopping you from achieving with regard to this? And that was such a change. Mm-hmm. So instead of being on the defensive back foot, you've got someone saying, what is stopping you? And that engendered discussion, and then out would come action from that, from him. He might get the boss of another department in and said, look, these guys are consistently having this problem. What can we do? So he was a real fix-it. Now, if you consistently weren't achieving then, because then the spotlight comes back on you.
Yeah.
But when you've got a boss who just changed the whole culture of that meeting, and that was then a brilliant meeting to go to, because you've got this real enabler in charge of you, who was still strict and would look at you in the eye if things weren't going well. But what a change to be part of that type of collaborative meeting.
And you wouldn't be surprised, Ian, to know what you've just described there happens in the corporate world as well.
Yeah.
So have we experienced the bullying and the banging the desk and the screaming? Yes. Does that have the positive effect? It has the effect of getting results short term.
Yeah.
But everybody's waiting to get out the door.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing in your field rather than ours, getting out the door is not such a natural thing, right? Because if you're in the force, you're in the force.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you making sure you develop those guys for the next level is quite, because look, a leader's job is to create leaders.
Yes.
I don't think many leaders realise that.
No.
Their job is to create leaders. It's not to create business.
Yeah.
Leaders, right?
Yeah.
So how did you work with that? What did you do in terms of looking at creating the next leaders in the guys that you worked with and girls that you worked with?
Well, yeah, it's but I worked with some people with great potential. I would you do reviews. Anyone you line manage, you do reviews, and they should be regular. There's nothing worse than that boss who only sees you once a year to discuss how you're getting on, and then points out some concerns they've had for the last 6 months. That's just terrible. So regular, and they can be really formal.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Sorry, right? It's terrible, but happens absolutely everywhere.
I know. And it's like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
But, I used to have a couple of coffee meetings with people just to chat, and used to see and say, well, what are your aspirations? Where do you think? And some people, the police is fantastic. You can go sideways, upwards, straight up. It's wonderful. The choices of things you can do are fantastic.
Yeah.
So just, talk to them and what do they want to do, and then see how you can help them get there. Do they need a little bit of extra evidence to do something? Well, can you give them some little special responsibilities to help them develop? Or some cases, I say to people, you must take promotion. And they go, no, I'm really happy doing this job. You say, no, you must. You've got such potential. And It's fantastic then, in years to come, for me to be calling them sir or ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've gone up around me, and it's brilliant because they're such great people. So
there's a balance. There's something in my mind that says it sounds like you're investing a lot of time in people and people development, people management, with reviews, with their personal development, with their skills. What sort of percentage of time do you think you spend doing that versus operational type management?
I can't. I think that's difficult to say, because you also spend time with people in an operational role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
So I couldn't really say, it was X percent of time.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It wasn't that huge, because the day job has to keep going, but you're still with those people.
Yeah.
And that chat might only be 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It might be half an hour. So it varies. But with anyone who's working for you, the more time you can spend with them, the better.
Yeah.
And
because you're selling a message, a mission, why we're doing something.
And what was the biggest team that you had? Because you had quite a big team at one point, didn't you?
I suppose the biggest was in the Olympics, where I had a couple of thousand officers a day working under me, and I'm in a pyramid. We have a gold, silver, bronze structure.
Yeah.
So Neil, from the military, you'd understand that. I don't know, Albert. Are you familiar with that?
No, tell me a bit more.
So the gold commander is the one in charge, who sort of, if you like, having reviewed all the information available, sets the strategic aim.
Mm-hmm.
The silver then determines the tactical actions that support that, and then the bronzes are working to silver, and they could be on a geographical area delivering those tactics, or they could be from a specialism supporting that. And then you have the sub bronzes who work to the bronzes and so on, and it works down in the pyramid. So I was on top of a pyramid with all the reserves, so all the public order officers and a lot of the specialisms supporting the policing of the Olympics in London.
Right.
Now that was quite difficult, because I'm based at headquarters in our control room. So my plan is being delivered by a big team of chief inspectors, who are the ones I see face to face. I don't see the staff reporting to them. So I'm relying on them to deliver the plan for me.
So that's something that I'd like to explore a bit more then. So that means the guys in your line during that, let's call it project that you were there, you don't necessarily know those guys. They're not people you've got relationship with or history with.
Well, and I did. Now, the advantage with the Olympics was the command team at the gold, silver, bronze level. We'd worked together for several years on various events in London.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this incredibly close relationship. And before the Olympics went live, we were all put into one room for 3 months to polish all our plans.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all actually in an office together where we can shout across the room to each other. So this amazing bond built.
Yeah.
And then all the guys working to me, I've worked with over the years on various jobs.
Okay.
So we all knew each other. So there's incredible trust. And when you've got trust and somebody says, Ian, I want, you say, you got it.
Yeah.
Rather than why.
That's perfect, Ian. By the way, trust came up on a conversation 2 Zoomcasts ago. As being an absolute key attribute to making this work.
Yeah. So I did a lot of work before the Olympics with the team going to deliver my plan, if you like. So we'd have briefings and meetings so they understand what and why and how.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you go live, I'm relying on them, because I can't physically get out and see everything they're doing.
But how do you build that? How do you get that trust? Because it's okay to say you've got to trust people, but how do you get to that point where you trust them and they trust you?
I think that just comes from experience and working together. It's like you now trust me with regard to events when we work together, because you've got experience of what I do, how I do it, and you're happy for me to go on and do things and so on. So a lot of it comes from you've been through joint training together, you've done live operations together, and it just comes from that. And you also know who's really good at that, who's not so good at that bit. Some people are better at some things than others, and you can draw on the strengths of individuals as well.
So do you create an environment where people can, communicate effectively and something, and that creates trust in that environment? So are there things you do as a leader that embrace trust in an organisation?
I mean, that's really hard off the top of my head. I go back, when I was the chief inspector, I had 5 civilian managers working to me all around the criminal justice portfolio. So, and they all had very different roles, but we used to meet every week, and I insisted they brought a cup of coffee and no paper. We started meeting for no more than an hour, and we'd just talk about how work was going, and we'd use that as a brainstorm. Mm-hmm. And people would kick ideas around. So people who were doing totally different jobs would be giving ideas to someone else about how they could do their job better when they were asking for help. So that there built trust. That was fantastic. And that built a really good team. That's quite a simplistic thing. And then I worked at Fulham Police Station, so responsible for policing Chelsea Football Club, Fulham Football Club, and Queen's Park Rangers. So there we had policing operations, often high risk, involving violence and disorder, where the newest PC is in the room being briefed with a couple of hundred other people by the chief superintendent and superintendent. And that's a trust thing. Then you're all going to go out and work together in quite a difficult environment. So that builds a tremendous relationship, very high morale in stations like that, where you get everyone working together like that.
Mm. So it sounds like I mean, for you, it's a very day-to-day, very visible contribution that people are making, right? In the corporate world, you don't always get that chance to see that.
Yeah.
So trust is one of those elements that you've got there. What would you put down as the other measures of success for leadership? How would you measure leadership in the career that you've come through?
Do you mean other qualities people have from a good...
Yeah, the qualities and maybe the behaviours or the practices.
If I think about the good bosses I've worked with, so they've got clarity about, if you like, what the mission is. Mm-hmm. They've got good comms that support that, and some people are better. Some people are good verbally, some people are better on paper, but they've got good comms. Sometimes, but not always, they're quite inspirational type, sort of charismatic people. They've got integrity. They're fair. I mean, I'll just go on a tangent. Imagine being on a very senior briefing by a very senior officer, hammering home the need for integrity in the police, and and you all know that individual's a married man who's having an affair. Yeah. So how can that person stand there, and half your brain is thinking, there's a good message here. I've got to share that message with the team. Yeah. But why is that person? So that's, so integrity and, fairness. Yeah. And consistency. If you've got an inconsistent boss, that's really difficult. Yeah.
It's really interesting. These points keep coming up. Time again, and it's not rocket science. This, we could probably do one leadership Zoomcast and say, here's the formula, guys. Be clear on what you want people to do. Be clear on the mission or the vision. Make sure you're communicating effectively and communicating regularly. Right? It's not a one-time, once a month, I'm going to communicate with you, but communicating effectively. The integrity keeps coming up time and time again. Yeah. Basically, do what you say you're going to do, and don't say something and then go and do something else. Yeah. And this consistency of purpose, consistency of message, it keeps coming through time and time again. Question that pops in my head, because there's different scenarios, right? There's day-to-day operational stuff that you have to deal with in something like the police. Then there's crisis situations or incident situations where you've got to make quick decisions, and you've got to do you have to lead in a different way in a crisis situation or in a hot situation than you do in an operational type situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like a business, because we're also looking at a yearly plan. So in all police departments, you've got a yearly plan, you've got budgets, you've got allocating people to tasks, you've got that sort of slow stuff going on. Right. Then you've got, what are we doing this week? What are we doing today? And then you've got something's happened and it's happened now. And then, if you think about something like the London tube bombings, go back to that, happened like that. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those, you've got to do it, and you've got to do it now. And there's no time to have long discussions about what are we doing, why are we doing it, why it's important. It's, you lose that supporting discussion, which is often used to sort of to sell a message, isn't it, to the team about why you're doing something. And that's you've got to do it, and you've got to do it right now. And you might make the wrong decision there, and you might correct it an hour later, but it's got to be done right now.
So that decision making, because I know you and I have had a conversation about this a little while ago, but that decision making in the police, how does a leader make a decision? Do they do it on their own? Do they do it in a group? Do you have your sub-lieutenants there? You know, what's the method that's used for leaders making decisions?
Well, I think the faster the decision, it's like that PC. You turns up at a car crash, 3 vehicles involved, somebody clearly, really ill on the floor, etc. They've got to make a decision like that. They can't call a sergeant on the radio and say, what should I do? So they've got to look at it, and they've got to make an assessment immediately of what they've got to do. And you often haven't got time to discuss there. We used to use something called a decision-making model.
Right.
So you gather information, you apply an intelligence assessment to it, you work out the threat associated with that, and what the priorities in that threat, what legal options you've got, powers you've got, and then you look at your tactical options, you implement it, and you review it. And the review takes you straight back into the start of it. So it's a circular rather than a linear. Rather than A's happen, do B, you've got this bit in the middle. Now, if you take that back to that initial incident, something can unfold right in front of you as a police officer, and you've got to decide, what do I do, and what do I do right now? And it's quite a lonely decision to make, especially the more senior you are.
Yeah. It feels like what you have to do here, Ian, is a lot more, should I call it autocratic, right? We're not looking for democracy. We're not sitting down to have a coffee and plan it. We've got to take a decision now, and we've got to go with it. As you say, it may not be the perfect decision, but you have to make a decision and you have to move on. And I think that's a slightly different character than some of the characters we might see. But actually, it sounds like you could bring a lot to the corporate world from that kind of behaviour.
Yeah, because and that's sort of there are senior officers who do a lot of that type of critical incident work, who are very good at it, and there are others, and you equate this to a business. There are others who aren't so good at that type of really fast decision making. Mm-hmm. But if you give them something that a day to work over, they'll be absolutely superb. And they're not comfortable in that immediacy. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think you have to recognise that not everyone's going to be the same, because that doesn't help you either. You want people who are different to get those different ideas in. If you think like the London tube bombings, you have the initial response from the police, the ambulance, fire, straight to the scene and dealing with saving life, preventing harm, and so on. And then in the command structure at Scotland Yard, senior officer arrives, I'm in charge, first meeting, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And in we went. A gang of us went in that room, and he said, right, what's happened? And there was a quick briefing, and he said, right, these are the priorities. Go, go, go. Everyone happy? Yes. See you again, 30 minutes. Action, back, see you in an hour, and so on. And it built like that. So it was still collaborative to an extent, but it's very much, this is my decision, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Thinking about that immediately, Neil, how are we doing on the time?
No, I think we're okay, actually.
So I'm whiffling.
A couple of minutes, but there's something I want to really just capture from that, because of the point that is really valid, I think, in business. So for a PC to feel comfortable making a decision on the spot, or whoever is the most senior person, or whoever is the first person there, how do you create a culture where it's okay to make a decision at that moment in time, even if it's wrong?
It's how you deal with people. That's a really good point, isn't it? Because if you've got someone who jumps down your throat when you made a decision that's gone wrong, what are you going to do next time?
You're not going to do anything.
You're going to hesitate. You're going to think about protecting yourself first.
Yeah.
But I'd much rather people made a decision in the best interests, and then we'll have a look at it afterwards. We can always have a look at it, and there's lots of things you can fix, or get, you can get things back on track. But it's much better and say, right, why did you do that? And in the circumstances, I thought this was the best thing to do. Now, if their decision is so far off kilter, then you've got a problem with that individual.
Yeah.
But most people want to do their best in the circumstances. And that's part of the culture you create as an individual.
But it's interesting because if you protect that protective card, and we've seen this in business, haven't we, Albert? You know, where your decisions are questioned, and therefore you don't feel comfortable about making the decision, or you're thinking, if I make this decision, what's that going to impact on me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay if you're making all the right decisions all the time. No one ever says thank you for making the right decisions. The only time you ever hear from someone is if you've made the wrong decision. And
because if you create a culture of arse, well, I call it arse covering, then you also break down how a team functions.
Yeah.
Because instead of being open with each other, they sort of sit, like this. I'm going to keep this here, and I'm really worried about me, so I'm going to be careful how I talk to you and share stuff with you. So it can really affect how a whole team functions. It can destabilize the whole team.
I think you'll break down courage and you'll break down risk taking as well.
Yes.
I'm going to do the safest thing every time because I want to keep my job. Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think you're right on time, by the way, because I've got so many questions I've written down here. I think we have to have a part 2 because we would be into an hour if we're not careful. So, I mean, Albert, is there any one last question you think would be?
No, I'm good because I know you've got your killer question that you like to ask. And
okay. Well, so the question I like to ask at the end of these kind of conversations is, if you could be asked any question on leadership, what question would you like to be asked?
That's a terrible. It's such a huge subject. It's so, I've made some notes for this conversation.
Yeah, I love those notes.
It's huge. I mean, everybody wants to, it's like, give me an example of when everything went really well. Your decisions, your leadership went really well, etc. So everybody likes a nice soft question like that. And I've waffled there. That's such a huge subject.
I would say then, Ian, from all those wonderful notes you've got there, is there anything there that we haven't covered that you'd really want to get to the audience, right?
Good point.
So
I mean, well, there's lots of little. I've got lots of little stories on there, but I think you covered it earlier. It's not rocket science. It's all about how you apply that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all, we're all sort of experienced, and we've all worked with people who just apply it really well. Some people excel in how they do it, and some people are just awful. And their behaviour, in some way, is it nervousness? Sometimes uncertainty, lack of confidence.
Yeah.
They behave in a way that is destructive to an organisation.
Yeah. Well, that would be a good question to ask. Actually, is why are some people like that? But we'll pull it together there. But the consistent point that keeps coming through, I'll just say it again so that people who are listening to this can pick it up, is being clear on. Good leaders are clear on the mission, clear on what's needed. They communicate regularly, and their regular communication. They're consistent. They have integrity, throughout what they do and what they expect from their teams. And the last point I made down here is about decision making, enabling decision making, and letting people take risks. That's it. If you add delegation or enabling, that ability to say to someone, right, you get on with that, and you come and let me know how you're getting on. That ability to delegate. Albert, any other final?
No, look, I mean, the last point for me is just to thank Ian, right? And I'll hand back to you to close off, Neil. But Ian, thank you. And there's a reasonable chance we might have to get you back on again because if we've got a very specific topic, there might be some things you want to drill into. All I would say as I close is the similarities between what you did and what your teams did is so close to the corporate world.
Yes.
It just comes at it from a slightly different angle. But I'm actually very surprised myself as to how close it is on what you've taken us through. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
No, it's good to see you both.
Thank you. Neil, I'll leave you to close.
Okay, I'll do the marketing close. So if you could subscribe or give us a thumbs up below, please, in the YouTube channel. Podcast is available on Spotify and all the good podcast sites. So, you can listen to this while you're driving. Any feedback you've got, any input you've got, please give us comments and feedback. It's great to get that. Any ideas for other episodes. But thank you for joining and thanks for the feedback. And Ian, great to see you. Thanks for all your time.
Thank you. Cheers, both.
All right, take care. See you later.